Hi. I'm with the filmmakers behind The Problem of the Hero. I'm with director Shaun Dozier.
Dozier.
Dozier, okay. Actor David Brunnen.
That's great. That's awesome.
I know these are things that I should have gotten straight going in. And producer Serena Ebhardt. All right. And hey, okay. So let's just start with the formalities. What is The Problem of the Hero? What is the story about?
David, do you want to take this?
I was going to say, Shaun, go for it.
Okay, I can go for it. So Problem of the Hero is the story about the collaboration between Richard Wright and Paul Green, and how their argument over the ending during rehearsals effectively ended their friendship.
All right. Yeah, I watched this last night, and I'll say, going in, as the plot was really starting to roll along, it was like, oh no. And then it was like, oh, okay, I get what's going on here. This is what I like about movies, especially dramatic movies, is your film. It keeps you on your toes. It challenges your current beliefs, and it forces you to not only challenge it, but to kind of wrestle with ideas, especially ideas that we're dealing with today. So the question I have for you is, what is the genesis of the project? How did it start?
Well, before I even dive into it, Alan, do you mind me asking, what made you say, oh no? I'm really curious.
Oh, no, it's because, okay, well, let's be real. We're living
there's no wrong answers to this. I'm just curious before I dive in.
Yeah, we live in a divisive time. Let's just say that.
Mm-hmm.
And your film really cuts to the heart of, I think, not just the issue of race relations, but of where we are today in terms of, I'll throw out critical race theory. That's one of the issues behind it, and the films tend to be preachy about it. It tends to be, here's my viewpoint, and I'm going to hammer away, and I'm going to tell you why you're wrong. And what I liked about your film was it forced you to wrestle with it. It's not, I don't know your viewpoints. I don't know your specific viewpoints, but you're presenting both sides of it, and you're forcing these two sides to wrestle with each other. And I think in a way that's how you build allies, is through reason and not through coercion, or not through violence, so to speak. And that's what I appreciate about your film.
Thanks for answering my question.
Yeah.
And thank you for that, because it was what we set out to do. We're concerned about modern day discourse where people only talk to hear themselves, and as opposed to true dialogue.
And Alan, I think your reaction to the film mirrors that of practically everybody who's seen it, everybody who's been a part of it from the very starts of the production of the film, into actually the filming of principal photography on the set, and then the reaction that you're having, as well as audience members. It's down. Everybody has a very similar reaction, even though they may have very different viewpoints and perspectives in regards to our decision by the writers to go there. And the reason why I went there first is because it's a credit to the writers James A. Hodge and Ian Finley. It really is, that they were able to go there in the fashion they did. The project is based on a stage play that Serena and I produced, called Native, by Ian Finley, who is the playwright. We were encouraged by the Paul Green Foundation and others to explore the work, particularly Paul Green's work. But as we dove deeper into Paul's life and his work and his social justice advocacy, we honed in, and particularly Ian honed in on the working relationship of Richard Wright and Paul Green and their friendship. Along the way, we realized, as the stage play was being created and we toured it on the East Coast, that we realized, and we kind of knew this, but we realized that a lot of people have no idea who Richard Wright is, and the groundbreaking work that he did in the early to mid 20th century. He's often noted, I think James Baldwin noted him and labeled him the godfather of African American literature here in the United States. And certainly a lot of people didn't know who Paul Green was, who was a social justice advocate, particularly through his work. He labeled himself a folk philosopher. here in North Carolina, Pulitzer Prize winning playwright in the early 20th century. And certainly a lot of people don't know about their working relationship in the 40s and their friendship that Shaun mentioned that dissolved over this particular incident. A big reason why we did this and why it evolved into the film when we were encouraged to do the film, but we realized that a lot of people really have no idea who these men were and their impact on our lives today. Not only in the 20th century, their impact on the lives today and the discourse, the kind of discourse that we have and the social justice efforts that a lot of people carry on today. And then that goes to the root of how this started. And then I would say that we started to ask around. I should note that Serena and I have our primary focus has been on the production of theatrical productions that have toured nationally. We then ventured into broadcast, primarily with PBS productions based on our stage work, and then we were encouraged to do this. And through those avenues, I had the good fortune to meet Steve Milligan, who was our director of photography and cinematographer. He encouraged me to talk to Shaun, and I met Shaun, and both of them, thankfully, who were quite our gallant leaders in this project and how it unfolded, said yes to my entreaties and Serena's entreaties as well. Mm-hmm. So that's how the project evolved to the beginning of its actual creation.
Now, was the original play? You said it was Native. Was
called Native?
Yeah. Was how long ago was that written? And then what was the process like to say, okay, we're going to adapt it into The Problem of the Hero?
I want to say 2015, right? 2015 is when Serena directed the stage play. We workshopped it here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, with the Deep Dish Theater and Paul Frelick's very generous use of his theater. And then Ian did mad updates every night.
It was an amazing process. Every single night we'd have an audience. They'd give feedback after the show, and Ian would rush home and rewrite. And then sometimes he'd have to undo his rewrites because then we missed a character so much that we couldn't do the show with him being cut. So it was I think we had 15 versions of the stage script before we went forward with the stage production.
And it's interesting you said when you had the reaction, oh no, are they going to go there? And Ian certainly did go there. I would say the stage play takes place in I want to say the Bristol Hotel. It no longer exists in Manhattan, but it takes place in a hotel room in the Bristol Hotel, where they met once, maybe twice. But the stage play is very different from the film because we obviously, through Shaun and Steve's and James A. Hodges' creativity, moved it into the theater itself.
And so I guess I'm just curious about just the story itself and in the context of where, you say 2015. So that's kind of, that's kind of the upswelling of Black Lives Matter. I guess the ultimate question I have is how much was current day race relations brought into the story, or was it a direct kind of way to address it as well?
I'd love for Shaun to answer that and Serena, but I will just note before they do, principal photography, all of this was done before the George Floyd murder. Okay. And that's something to keep in mind, but I think all of us feel, well, I'll keep my mouth shut because I do have something to say, but I want to hear what Shaun and Serena say.
Shaun, I'll go second.
Well, I came on after they'd already come up with this idea, obviously, but it was definitely on the forethought or on the forefront of all of our minds, I think, thinking about where race relations were and who has a right to tell a story. Like, are we appropriating someone's work? And I also think where we end up, like the voices that we give to Paul Green and Richard Wright, we try to do their voices justice, but it's also through the lens of how we view race relations today and like our knowledge of like what is appropriation, what is not, and things like that. So like the ultimate ending that we end up at, I don't know that Richard Wright ever directly would have said what he does to Paul Green in the theater in our movie, right? But I think if he lived today, that would definitely have been the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, that was a brutal ending.
Yeah.
So this, this is a true story. It is obviously embellished. We had to imagine some of the conversation, but it's not just about race. It's about politics. It's about class. It's about patriotism. It's about economics. And so there are so many arguments folded into this, and it's a little surprising to see which man is on which side of the argument. Sometimes it's not exactly what you think. But these were deep discussions that these two men were having, and they were the best of friends when they started this project. To go back, Richard Wright had written this amazing novel called Native Son, and many people are familiar with it. High schools, it's often on high school reading lists, but it was a seminal novel. And he had the opportunity. It sold so many copies when it was published, and he had the opportunity to turn it into a stage play for Broadway with Orson Welles directing and
John Houseman
involved in it. And Richard Wright said, "I have never done anything for theater before. I'm going to need, someone to help me adapt this." And so he turned to Paul Green. And the reason he did was because Paul Green was known for writing plays about the Black experience in the South at the early part of the century. And he actually won the Pulitzer Prize for one of Paul Green's plays called In Abraham's Bosom. And Richard Wright was very intrigued by Paul Green. He was white, but he was a Pulitzer Prize winner. That can translate into the box office when you go to Broadway. And so he asked Paul Green to work with him, and they met for an entire summer to do the work at UNC Chapel Hill. And this was in 1940. So this was not a time where race relations were normalized between Black and whites working together. The university had some issues with it. There were obviously townspeople in UNC who didn't like this at all, that a Black man and a white man were working together. And so it had its problems, but the two men themselves got along like a house on fire. They loved each other, and they loved dialoguing about this stuff. They were great sparring partners. They were out for the same goal, though they had different methods. Where our story starts is they are in the theater a couple of days before opening night, and they are having a metamorphic debate about the one page of the script, a single page. And that prompts them to go on about why they each feel the way they do about what this page has to say. And in the end, they cannot resolve it. And so well, I shouldn't give it away, but and
we could go on for a really long time, more time than we have here. But Alan, I would, from not only the performer viewpoint in this film, but also from the producer perspective, and I think Shaun will remember this, and I know Steve would, and Serena would. Throughout the time from the time we created the play to the time we started filming, I have persistently had that impresario producer mindset of, oh my God, we got to get this film done. It's the perfect time to get it done. It resonates, and it's so relevant to what's going on now. And everybody has to remind me, and I have to remind myself, because it becomes more relevant and resonant every day. That we've been working on this project since, we started conceptually with Ian in 2012. So that's over 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And every day through each, I won't even begin to go down the list of issues of personal agency, of police brutality, of so many different examples of words being action. And again, personal issues of personal agency and class. Every day it becomes more, it resonates that much more and becomes that much more relevant.
Yeah. I'll add on to that. There used to be a time where we could debate, where we could talk over an issue. and do it in more than 250 characters. And you know, the person I am today comes from the conversations, the debates, the arguments I've had with people who I don't agree with, and we built a respect and we built an understanding of our positions. And I will dare say that, you know, my positions have changed and evolved and moved left and right over time, and I miss those days, you know. And this film was just a reminder of that, to see Paul and Richard being able to have a brutal, frank discussion, especially at the end, is to me was quite brutal, because, you know, they're you know, I've been there where you know, it comes down to being labeled something you're not, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so that's what I appreciate about this movie, and why I encourage people to see it, you know, because we need we need to return back to these times. I hate to say it.
So I want to, I'm, you know, a producer and director of the stage play, but I was blown away, truly. I know this is our own project, but blown away by Shaun's understanding of how to move back and forth, his vision, his conceptual ability to move us back and forth without the wavy lines of, oh, it's a flashback. You know,
Yeah.
he seamlessly moves us in and out of past and present, of background, of setup to current conversation. The first time I saw the whole film edited, I couldn't speak. He does such a beautiful job of it. And Shaun, I just thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's something I could have never conceived as a stage director.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question in that realm, but because the play does come off as the movie comes off as a play, but it's very much a feature film. You know, what was your approach to that, and how do you manage keeping the heart of the story in tow at throughout the film?
Well, I mean, I think at the onset, it was originally a 2-man play in a single room, right? So we already kind of stuck with that to begin with, but expanding it out in the theater provided so many more opportunities for expanding and playing with time and space and things like that. So, like, being able to transition from their office at the St. James Theater to their office on the stage at Chapel Hill, right, is something, since we're already in the space of the theater, it goes much more easily for an audience member. A movie that I saw a while ago, Lily's French-Canadian film, did something similar to this. They transitioned to space and time like that. So that was one of the reasons we decided on this. Dogville was another film that took place in the theater, right? So we referenced that. Yeah, so just, and as far as creating the I forget what you said.
The picture and the seamless moving between back and forth of present day and memory.
Yeah. And we're also, like, we worked in, so, like, adding scenes to the film. We added a scene with Nell, with Richard Wright, so the actress who played the mother, and adding a scene with Paul Green and Canada Lee, giving space away from the argument, because if you're just, like, doing one solid argument for 80 minutes, it's a bit much for the audience. So getting away from that and giving time to breathe, to get back into it, especially after we have the big, like, are you a communist scene, like, and they go their separate ways. So giving space and time to come back in and then end the argument, even though they get back into it.
And Shaun and Steve Milligan really had to give Serena and I lessons in film history and cinematography history. I mean, they said they told us, go watch Dogville, go check out John Sayles and Lone Star, go check out Hunger, the film with Bobby Sands, and a variety of other projects, because I'm so enamored. I'm so enamored of My Dinner with Andre and the Buckley Baldwin debate, in Cambridge and those kinds of things. And they said, you need to go watch this and see where we're headed with this, okay? And I had to give over to Shaun's vision and Steve's vision, and it was a collective vision indeed, but shared between them both. And there you see the result. Thank God.
I
Thank God.
assume any filmmaker on any side of the camera understands how much you have to let go of things. I mean, Shaun had to let go of certain things. We had to let go of certain things. We had to trust in a medium that we were not familiar with. I mean, we've both been in film and television products, but we've never had to direct it or produce it or write it. We're usually actors in it. So this was a wonderful, joyous, creative learning curve for us. And we had Shaun and Steve guiding us through the whole thing. We are so blessed.
There were some moments that were not joyful, okay? There were some, I promise. They were learning experiences.
Having seen a lot of adaptations, I know it's not as simple as people think it is to adapt a stage play into a movie. And I've seen it done wrong many times. So let me ask you this. Did you feel, I'm going to throw out the word controversial, because that's kind of how I walked away with it. This is a somewhat controversial film, because I don't think it plays to both sides cleanly, where I think it's meant to kind of keep everybody off balance. Was it difficult to not constantly be second guessing yourself, or were you just kind of like, this is the message and we're sticking with it?
So I'm going to answer that quickly.
And I want to definitely hear Shaun's take on that.
Depending on whose side you're on, you think that it's playing to the opposite side.
Right.
For example, there are a lot of people that love Paul Green, particularly in our state. He can do no wrong because he's a native of North Carolina, and they felt like we gave too much deference to Richard Wright, which is interesting, because I think that we probably, especially with Ian's writing and James A. Hodges' writing, that they really tried to play it right down the middle. But depending on who you think you're aligned with, you always see the other guy got the better argument. It's a funny thing. It's kind of like Via Dolorosa, the play Via Dolorosa, that you feel like the other guy is getting more of the good stuff. So I think we tried to be very fair. And though you see three white faces sitting here, that's just today's casting call for the interview. We did consult the African American community. We did consult experts, and we have amazing actors who worked with us on this. And our other producer, Ayanna Johnson, who cannot be with us today, she put us in check about being true to the African American voice and those sensitivities. So it's not just white filmmakers making what they think is a balanced argument. We really, really did go to the table with multiple opinions and multiple races to talk that part out so that we would be accurate about it.
Well, I want to hear what Shaun says.
I mean, from my perspective, the whole creative team all deeply researched both sides, right? And I feel like at least what I was trying to do as a director is to have each actor, have each character fully explain their side, right? And so what we come out with at the end, whatever feeling you have, is your feelings based what either character had to say. I don't think we tried to slant it one way or the other. I mean, I think Richard Wright has a finer point maybe, or a bigger point to make at the end. But we're also seeing that largely through Paul Green, as he's the more of where you're identifying with most of the time, probably most people at least. Yeah. And we start with him and end with him at the prison as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a shame that if we have to choose sides, so to speak, at the end of the film, and I think that just does a disservice not only to the film but also to the discourse.
And I hope people don't feel obligated to do that within themselves or externally. It's been fascinating to me as being involved in the film, not only with Serena and Shaun and the others, but to be an observer of conversations that were happening on set as we were in the middle of principal photography, or even some of the exteriors, and the conversations that I've heard audience members have, the conversations that I got to have more often than the others with the Wright family, with the Paul Green family members and the foundation. Our conversations mirror so much of what Ian and James created in this dialogue, and even the conversation in some of the film festival, the process of determining which film festivals we were going to submit to, and which ones we've been selected by. Even those conversations, the exchange of why we were selected and how we were selected. And the post screening conversations, they mirror so much of what the exchange is between, and the interaction is between Paul and Richard in the film.
Yeah, I mean, what has the reception been like from the now that you've placed it out there, laid it out there for the world to see? What have you been surprised by any of the responses, or is what is happening or how people are talking about exactly what you hoped for?
Well, Shaun, let me just ask Shaun, because we haven't really had a chance to talk about this much. I'm just curious, Shaun. You were at River Run. I mean, were you surprised? What were your takes on what folks' on the questions that people had?
Yeah. I mean, I think there was a range of responses. I think the most interesting one to me was an older gentleman's like, well, why didn't Paul Green get it? The idea of whether or not he got it. I was like, well, if you look at history, like he still revised the play in the 60s, or I think it was maybe in the 70s. Whenever he revised the play, like he still stuck with his ending. So like, I think Paul Green understood everything that Richard Wright was saying. He just didn't agree. So like to say he didn't get it, I think he did get it. He just didn't agree. Yeah. And so, I mean, I think that's very difficult for some people. Is like, well, if he got it and he still didn't agree, then, that I don't like how that makes Paul Green look. It was like, people are complicated and they can hold, contrary opinions about things. And I think that's what's interesting about this particular argument.
And, it's been also interesting in the, and Serena can chime in on what the conversation was in Santa Fe, but, and where it's been in the other screenings. I haven't had a chance to save this actually in some of the conversations that have occurred, but I hope people, I want to try to remind people to keep in mind that this is one episode out of the lives of two men who lived incredibly full, very active lives, full of various endeavors and projects, risks, life-threatening experiences because of their beliefs, their social justice advocacy. And in Paul's case, his peace activism, and in Richard's case, his very political activism. This is one small moment out of their lives. And there are some people who kind of rush to say, well, yes, why didn't Paul get it? Or why couldn't Paul understand? Well, I think the next 30, 40 years of Paul's life was spent, and it's evident in interviews and correspondence that Shaun has read, Serena has read, and I've read, evident correspondence that he struggled with this episode, perhaps more so than many others in his life, and the struggles that he had with Richard. And he revisited it time and time again in a very genuine way, and a very empathetic way. And I think Richard probably revisited it, but it's tough to gauge simply because he was very, it moved on. And you ask about on his response. I think I responded one time to one question in Santa Fe that somebody said, that I said, Paul reached out to Richard within 6 months to a year after this episode, right? After Paul left, went home to Chapel Hill, and the show opened, and they never spoke again. But Paul attempted to reach out, and Shaun, you correct me if I'm wrong, reached out within the next 6 to 12 months, I believe, right?
Yeah, I mean, he reached out to see if he wanted to work together again. I
Right.
believe.
And Richard never responded. He
Mhm.
made the choice never to respond. And I said to the person asking the question in Santa Fe, I said, well, who can blame Richard? Who can blame him? And they were just shocked. They were shocked. They said, why do you say that? And I said, well, if you put yourself in the frame of mind of Richard Wright, an African American, a successful, financially successful, creative and artistically successful African American man at the start of the Second World War, and you've got a lot of other things on your mind that you want to take care of in your life, or that you want to address in your life about your personal experience and the experience because of your race, I can understand why he would move on and be done with it.
I think it's important to understand that they were different ages too. Paul Green had fought in World War I. He remembered what it was like to go to war. This event takes place on the eve of World War II starting. And, Richard is a young firebrand who has not lived through the hardships of a world war yet. And it would be like talking to your grandfather, who's on the other side of the political aisle from you, about why they shouldn't be. They were different ages of different generations and different values and morals growing up, even though they agreed that people should be treated like people.
And I'll just say one thing. You asked about the audience response. I think every single response, even with the stage play, the response to the film has mirrored the stage play. There's this almost collective, deep exhale after they've experienced the story. Okay. Yeah. And that has been pretty universal.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that just says they were engaged. They're engaged with what was being said, and no matter what side of the debate you're on, you were challenged, and you're forced to think about your position and really decide whether your position is stronger or needs a little bit more nuanced work to it. And honestly, that's what I love about drama. That's what I love about film. What I love about theater, for that matter. And I have to say that's this is why I would wholeheartedly recommend The Problem with the Hero here, because you will struggle, and I think the struggle is good, and it's a struggle we all need to go through, no matter where we come from. So I have to thank you for just giving me this time. I know we went a little bit over, but it was a great conversation, and congratulations on the film.
We're grateful for your attention to this, and we're so, I need to give a nod to our entire production team and our actors. This has been an ensemble effort, and we're just so grateful to all the people who have surrounded us in this adventure.
Yeah, credit to Shaun and Steve for creating that ensemble atmosphere. Very much so.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get the important part out. How can we see The Problem with the Hero?
Several things happen. Yeah, several things happening. Some I can't talk about, and I'm sorry. But we have received inquiries on distribution. We have received those. We're exploring those options right now. In the meantime, we'll be at the Fottcandle Film Festival in Hickory, North Carolina, which was an original supporter with some funding support several years ago. So that happens September 20th, next week, actually. And then we move on to the Richmond International Film Festival on October 1st at the beautiful Bird Theater in Richmond. And there's some coming. There's some more coming, but I can't talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this is a good time for this movie to come out. So
we're in that festival cone of silence area, and we are hoping. We are hoping to get this out to the public. I think it will, sadly, I think it will always be relevant, because as long as people are othering them, othering other people, this is always a conversation to be had.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Alan, we are in that mode of congratulations, but you can't talk about it yet. So thanks for letting us. Thanks for letting us at least say that.
You're not the only one to have ever in this position. So congratulations, and I hope to see it out nationwide soon. All right.
Alan,
you.
thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Alan.